The long war on cancer has left us well short of victory. Radiation flashed on in the 19th century, chemotherapy began to drip in the 20th, but for so many, 100 years of research adds up to just a few more months of life. Well, tonight, you're about to see a discovery for the 21st century that may be a big leap forward, awakening the power of the body's immune system. For 10 months, we've been inside an experimental therapy at Duke University. Some of the patients there use words that doctors don't use, like miracle and cure. And that's remarkable because these patients were handed a death sentence, a relentless brain cancer called glioblastoma. To beat it, researchers are doing something that many thought was crazy. They're infecting the tumors with polio, the virus that has crippled and killed for centuries. In just a moment, polio will be dripped into the brain of 58-year-old Nancy Justice. Her glioblastoma tumor was discovered in 2012. Surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation bought her 2.5 years, but the tumor came roaring back. Now, the virus in this syringe, which mankind has fought to eradicate from the earth, is the last chance she has in the world.
You might feel a little tug, depending on...
In October this past year, half a teaspoon of polio flowed into her tumor.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Are you ready to go?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
We're starting. 9:21.
If you feel anything, you let us know.
I will, definitely.
Perfect.
Well, let me ask, do you feel anything?
No. So far, so good. Don't feel a thing.
Her husband, Greg, constantly inflates a buoyant optimism to save him from the weight of the unknown. Glioblastoma was diagnosed in the 21st year of the Georgia couple's marriage, just as they could make out the finish line for Zach and Luke at college. Her tumor can double in size every 2 weeks, and when glioblastoma returns, time is short. Doctors gave her 7 months, but good ones, maybe just 3 or 4. The tumor was aggressive, so
Yes.
you wanted an aggressive treatment.
Yes, yes.
You're a medical explorer. Does it feel that way to you?
I'm taking it one day at a time. It sounds very lofty to say medical explorer, but you know, throughout all of this, if this gives other people hope, I'm all for it.
Greg, you mentioned that Nancy was there for every important event in the boys' lives,
Right.
but there are a lot of important events to come.
Exactly.
What do you hope to see?
So I am going to see those boys walk across the stage at their college graduation. I am going to see them get married, and I am going to see grandkids, preferably in that order. And I know it's like such a mom bucket list, but I'll love every minute of it.
It was the day before that we saw Nancy preceded by her shield, the smile that she rarely lets slip.
I'm ready.
Nancy was wheeling into an intricate surgery to insert a path for the virus. That white mass is the tumor, back of her skull, near the top. Duke's chief of neurosurgery, Dr. John Sampson, used 3D MRIs to plot his course. He tacked between the lime green strands that connect to every vital function in her body, and he brought the catheter to the center of the lethal mass.
It's just like a sniper's bullet. If it doesn't go to the right place, it's not going to hit the target. And it's not only important to get it to the right place, but also to make sure that it doesn't go to the wrong places, doesn't cause any harm to the patient.
It doesn't travel throughout the brain.
It won't travel too far throughout the brain because it's a relatively big molecule, and the brain's a tight space, so it's limited in how far it can travel.
At least, that's what they expected, as Nancy became the 17th patient in the experiment. The polio infusion was slow. That half a teaspoon took 6.5 hours. But that's it. 1 dose, and she's done. No more surgery, chemo, radiation, nothing. If this works.
You're doing fantastic.
All right.
And show me your smile.
On Nancy's way home that same day, oncologist Dr. Anit Desjardins showed her how it went.
So we can exactly see where the polio virus went. So that's the MRI you and I looked at on Monday. Then you see here the brighter area there. Can you see
Yes,
that?
yes.
That's the polio virus.
Wow.
Exactly where we needed it.
Oh, cool.
Right where it should be.
In a few months, they'll take another MRI to see which is stronger, glioblastoma or polio.
The number of calls are increasing.
This is Duke's polio team. As usual in such studies, several of them have a financial stake, so they'll benefit too if it becomes commercial. Can you pick out the deputy director of the Brain Tumor Center? Well, when you're one of the world's leading cancer doctors, turns out you can wear what you like. And after 34 years, folks at Duke are used to how Dr. Henry Friedman's brain views fashion.
It's really good to see that this is going well.
It was Friedman who encouraged Nancy Justice to gamble on the polio experiment.
I wonder, of all the trials and all of the theories and all of the treatments that you have hoped for all of these years, how does this stack up?
This, to me, is the most promising therapy I've seen in my career, period.
A turning point in cancer care?
I hope so. I think it may well be.
Why would he say that during an early clinical trial with barely enough patients to fill an elevator? Because of the decades of work that have led to this moment. The virus is the creation of, the obsession of, Dr. Matthias Gromeyer, a molecular biologist who's been laboring over this therapy 25 years, the last 15 at Duke.
When you went to your colleagues and said, I've got it, we'll use the polio virus to kill cancer, what did they say?
Well, I got a range of responses from crazy to you're lying to all kinds of things. Most people thought it just was too dangerous.
I thought he was nuts. I mean, I really thought that what he's using is a weapon that produces paralysis.
Other researchers are experimenting with cancer treatments using viruses including HIV, smallpox, and measles. But polio was Dr. Gromeyer's choice because, as luck would have it, it seeks out and attaches to a receptor that is found on the surface of the cells that make up nearly every kind of solid tumor. It's almost as if polio had evolved for the purpose.
Gromeyer re-engineered the polio virus by removing a key genetic sequence. The virus can't survive this way, so he repaired the damage with a harmless bit of cold virus. This new modified virus can't cause paralysis or death because it can't reproduce in normal cells. But in cancer cells, it does. And in the process of replicating, it releases toxins that poison the cell. Duke went to the FDA for approval of this new Frankenstein virus.
They were afraid you might create a monster.
They were afraid we might create something which could infect the general community. I mean, look at me, I'm a scientist, I'm a physician, and I said, this is nuts. I think that their reaction was appropriate.
To satisfy the FDA, they did 7 years of safety studies. Tests on 39 monkeys proved they didn't get polio. And in 2011, the FDA approved a trial in humans. Someone had to go first. It's a hell of a thing to be told that you have months to live when you're 20 years old. In 2011, Stephanie Lipscomb was a nursing student with headaches. A doctor came in to say that she had this glioblastoma tumor, the size of a tennis ball.
I looked at the nurse that was sitting there holding my hand, and I said, I don't understand, like, what did he just say? It's kind of hard for me to process.
You had 98% of the tumor removed.
Exactly.
As much radiation as you can have in a lifetime, and chemotherapy.
Exactly.
And then in 2012, what did the doctors tell you?
Your cancer's back.
With recurrent glioblastoma, there were no options except the one that had never been tried before.
Did they tell you that it had never been tried in a human being before?
They did. But at the same time, I had nothing to lose, honestly.
I wonder what your mother said.
She looked at Dr. Desjardins and she said, you want to do what with my daughter? You want to do what? And I'm like, let's do it. Come on, let's go.
I have the sense that this scared you a lot more than you've let on.
Mm-hmm. It did. And I knew how scared my family was, and I didn't want them to see me scared.
But of course you were.
Mm-hmm.
In point of fact, we didn't know what the polio was going to do. We thought the polio virus might help her. We had no idea what it would do in the long haul. It was a crapshoot. It's roll the dice and hope that you're going to get an answer that is coming up sevens and not coming up snake eyes.
But in the months that followed, it looked like a bad bet.
So we treated her in May. Then in July, the tumor looked bigger, looked really inflamed. I got really concerned, got really worried.
You thought this wasn't working?
I thought it wasn't working.
Dr. Desjardins wanted to go back to traditional treatment, maybe another surgery, but Stephanie decided, against her advice, to wait. By October, 5 months after her infusion, an MRI showed that the tumor hadn't been growing at all. It turned out it only looked worse because it was inflamed. Stephanie's immune system had awakened to the cancer and gone to war.
Why didn't the immune system react to the cancer to begin with?
So cancers, all human cancers, they develop a shield or shroud of protective measures that make them invisible to the immune system. And this is precisely what we try to reverse with our virus. So by infecting the tumor, we are actually removing this protective shield and enabling the immune system to come in and attack.
So essentially what's happening here inside the tumor is you have a polio infection.
Yes.
And that sets off an alarm.
Yes.
For the immune system.
Yes.
The immune system says, there's a polio infection, we better go kill it.
Exactly.
And it turns out it's the tumor.
Yes.
It appears the polio starts the killing, but it's the immune system that does most of the damage. Stephanie's tumor shrank for 21 months until it was gone. This is an MRI from this past August. 3 years after the infusion, something unimaginable has happened for a patient with recurrent glioblastoma.
And there's no cancer in this picture
And
at all.
we don't see any cancer, active cancer cells in the tumor at all.
She is cancer-free. The only thing that remains is this hole, which is an artifact of an early surgery.
Under traditional standard of care treatment, Stephanie should not be standing here next to us today.
Absolutely not.
Stephanie, when they showed this to you, what did you think?
I wanted to cry with excitement this time.
How surprised are you by that?
I'm surprised because you never expect on a phase 1 study in particular, which is what she is on, to have these kind of results.
You're not expecting to cure people in a phase 1 trial.
You're not even necessarily expecting to help them. You hope so, but that's not the design of a phase 1 study. It's designed to get the right dose. When you get anything on top of that, it's cake.
Quite a cake.
Quite a cake. Biggest cake we've seen in a long, long time.
Tell me what you see there.
Dr. Fritz Anderson showed us the results in another patient, himself. He's a retired cardiologist, and at age 70, he became the second person in the polio trial.
This is a fairly sizable temporal tumor, which means...
That we see right here.
On the left is his tumor before treatment. On the right, a hairline scar where it used to be. Like Stephanie, that was nearly 3 years ago.
When they said that this thing is just a small scar and we think it's possibly cured, I nearly fell off my chair. I said, that's impossible. They said, well, we don't know, but so far it looks fantastic.
Do you consider yourself cured, or do you call it remission?
I feel it as a cure, and I live my life that way.
Fritz and Stephanie met for the first time here at 60 Minutes when we interviewed them last fall.
You should do a head bump. There you go. There you go.
Was yours on your right side?
No, on the left. Which one's yours?
My right.
Wait, let's do left, right to left. There we go.
With the early success, the team raised the dose in the next few patients in hope of an even better result. But that's when the polio trial encountered its first tragedies. When we come back, we'll look at how the virus is working in Nancy Justice, who we met in the beginning, and at what they've discovered after trying polio against lung cancer, breast cancer, and many others. For nearly a year, we've been following the clinical trial at Duke University where the polio virus is being used to kill a vicious brain cancer called glioblastoma. The goal of the experiment was to discover the right dose of the virus. The first 2 patients saw their tumors melt away, so with that remarkable result at small doses, the researchers increased the potency of the virus in the next patients. That's how they made a tragic but vital discovery about the power of immunotherapy in killing cancer.
Maybe you just close one eye.
It's been 3 years since Stephanie Lipscomb became the first patient to see her recurrent glioblastoma wiped out by polio.
Problem with memory? No. Vision? No.
She gets a checkup at Duke every 4 months.
Hey, how are you? Good.
And she's become a celebrity to the new patients starting the polio trial. 60-year-old Donna Clegg, a social worker from Idaho, will be patient number 14.
We're going to do it.
Yes. High five.
Thank you.
This was Donna Clegg before cancer, and this is how we found her last June, puffy from the steroids they'd used to limit the swelling in her brain. Like others in the trial, she'd had surgery, chemo, and radiation, but the glioblastoma came back, and the polio virus was her last chance.
I want to be able to live. So that's kind of how I feel, that this is going to be my opportunity to have a full life.
Donna's polio infusion was 3 times more potent than the one that worked for Stephanie. And that's the whole idea behind this phase 1 trial, to increase the dose in succeeding patients step by step in search of the best result. Dr. Henry Friedman is Deputy Director of Duke's Brain Tumor Center.
We believe in the philosophy we've learned in chemotherapy that more is better. So if we were getting a good response at dose level 1 or dose level 2, then go to dose level 3, 4, 5.
In Donna Clegg, doctors saw the expected inflammation as her immune system attacked the tumor. But the higher dose caused an immune response that was much too powerful. The inflammation put so much pressure on her brain she became partially paralyzed. Back home in Idaho, she decided it was all too much and dropped out of the polio trial.
I thought this was the miracle.
Her husband recorded this in a nursing home.
When you're told you either take this chance or die, what would you do?
If you had to do over again, what would you do?
I may not have done it.
Donna Clegg died 3 weeks ago. Because she left the trial, doctors at Duke can only theorize that it was a combination of the advanced state of her disease and the ferocious immune response that ended her life.
Donna Clegg suffered quite a lot, and I wonder how that weighs on your mind.
Every patient who has an outcome that is not positive weighs on my mind. I think that when you're doing a phase 1 study, you know that these things can happen, and I don't think that we helped her quality of life. We've learned something, and I don't know that their family will take heart in the fact they're part of a legacy of passing the torch to more patients that follow. I hope that that means something to them, but she is a patient who really did not derive benefit, and yet taught us something important.
You discovered that putting in too much polio virus created too large an immune response.
Absolutely.
And that was the turning point in the daring polio trial. What was learned from Donna Clegg's death may give life to Nancy Justice. Neuro-oncologist Dr. Annick Desjardins cut the potency of Nancy's infusion by 85%. It was a lower dose than they had ever intended to use in the study. Even so, Dr. Desjardins expected a big immune response.
In the next 4 to 6 months, we should see the inflammation, so the immune system waking up, starting to kill the tumor.
You will expect to see her MRI look worse in the early days?
Absolutely.
Before it gets better?
Absolutely.
It certainly did. After she returned to Georgia, Nancy's symptoms started to resemble Donna Clegg's. She had trouble with words. Her right side was weak. Her husband, Greg, took her back to Duke for an emergency MRI. This was Nancy's tumor before the polio infusion. 3 months later, the site had doubled in size. The swelling had pushed one hemisphere of her brain into the other.
Avastin, 500 milligrams.
Dr. Desjardins ordered a small dose of a cancer drug called Avastin, not to treat the tumor, but to reduce the swelling. Nancy's symptoms improved right away. And 2 weeks ago, Nancy had a new MRI. It was 4.5 months since her polio infusion, and we joined her husband and sons to see the new image for the first time. And you haven't had a chance to see it yet, so show us, doctor, what you have.
So glioblastoma is a tumor that left untreated, you expect the tumor to double in size every 2-3 weeks. So the fact that we don't see the tumor growing back, we don't see the swelling coming back, we don't see Nancy getting worse, all of that is very positive. It's a sign that the poliovirus is doing its job.
On the left is the inflammation that we saw earlier. On the right is the new MRI. Her tumor has a gaping hole. It's being wrecked from the inside out. So where does this go from here?
So now we keep following her, and hopefully it keeps shrinking and it keeps collapsing. And that's what we have seen with Fritz and Stephanie, that it continued shrinking for years.
Nancy, when you look at this, what do you think?
Oh, it's amazing. Oh my gosh. I mean, thank you, Lord. And these doctors, thank you, doctors. You know, and to just see this, you know, that's life. I mean, it's hard to not just start crying.
So far, there have been 22 patients in the polio trial. 11 died. Most of them had the higher dose, but even so, they lived months longer than expected. The other 11 continue to improve. 4 are past 6 months, which Duke calls remission.
We clearly are producing a very, very significant benefit. We've got an increase in median survival of over 6 months, which is huge in glioblastoma.
6 months doesn't sound like very
much.
much.
It doesn't sound like much, but that's just the midpoint. So we've got patients that are out as far as 33, 34 months. That is just unheard of in this disease.
Dr. Daryl Bigner is the head of the study and of Duke's Brain Tumor Center. He's been fighting brain cancer 50 years, and he told us he has never seen results like those in patients Fritz Anderson and Stephanie Lipscomb. Based on what you have seen, is it fair to say that Stephanie and Fritz are in remission?
Oh, absolutely. That's probably a very good term to use. They're in remission, and I think they would tell you that they consider themselves normal again.
Cured?
You know, I'm very reluctant to use the cure word, the C word as we call it, because we don't know how long it takes to say that a glioblastoma has been cured. But I am beginning to think about it.
Close your eyes for me. What side am I touching you? My left.
But what they've achieved in this rare form of cancer may be just the beginning. Molecular biologist Matthias Gromeyer, the creator of the virus, is pressing ahead. You have been testing this therapy against a number of other cancers just in a laboratory dish.
Yes.
What have you been able to kill so far?
So we have done this for lung cancers, breast cancers, colorectal cancers, prostate cancers, pancreatic cancers, liver cancers, renal cancers. We probably see this in just about any type of cancer you can imagine.
The man who's overseeing the polio trial for the FDA is Dr. Peter Marks, a deputy director responsible for hundreds of other experimental treatments for cancer. You have to wonder if it's too good to be true. Some of the results in these early trials appear nearly miraculous.
We hope they really are miraculous, but we do have to be cautious because sometimes people just get lucky. And the first patients they treat with the therapy respond very well, but subsequently additional patients don't.
Help me put immunotherapy in perspective here. How big an advance is this in terms of viruses to treat cancer?
So the field of immunotherapy is tremendously exciting. It's been a paradigm shift in how we go about treating cancer because there are real products out there that are immunotherapies that are actually helping people to live longer.
So we all know about surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, but now this is a fourth weapon.
Yes.
Already, 10 drugs that trigger the immune system have been approved, and they are significantly extending the lives of patients with cancers including lung cancer and melanoma. According to the rules of the FDA, Dr. Marks could not speak to us specifically about the polio trial, but in about a year, the FDA is expected to make a decision about whether to grant Duke what's called breakthrough status, which would make the polio treatment available to many more patients much sooner. Glioblastoma kills 12,000 Americans a year. Fritz Anderson expected to be one of them. Before he became the second patient in the Duke trial, he wrote his own obituary. He'll have to update it. 3 years later, he's cancer-free.
Stephanie Lipscomb.
Stephanie Lipscomb wasn't supposed to see her 22nd birthday.
How are you doing?
3 years later, she's graduated from nursing school.
Do you think being a cancer survivor is going to make you a better nurse?
Oh yeah, it already has. Just because I've been a scared patient, and so I know I loved it when nurses held my hand. So I like to be there and be there emotionally for them too.
And as Nancy Justice's tumor continues to shrink, it's now leaving room for her imagination to grow. Nancy, months ago when I met you for the first time, they were dripping the polio virus into your tumor. And you told me about some of the things that you were determined to see in the lives of these boys.
Exactly.
And I wonder if you're at a place now where you can start making plans.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's been what's kept me going. I will see them graduate college. I will see them get married, and I will have grandchildren, in that order.
A bold experiment to kill a vicious cancer has won breakthrough status from the Food and Drug Administration. Early tests at Duke University have been so successful, the FDA will fast-track this treatment to hundreds of patients while it's still being evaluated for final approval. The therapy is audacious. It uses the polio virus to attack a virulent brain cancer called glioblastoma, which is a death sentence of astonishing speed that leaves patients with only months to live. For 2 years, we've been following volunteers in the Duke clinical trial. We have witnessed nearly miraculous recoveries and unexpected defeats on a journey of discovery beyond the known frontiers of science.
Nancy Justice had been sentenced to a bleak prognosis when we met her in October 2014. At age 58, she had recurrent glioblastoma. It had come back after surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. Typically, she could expect to live 7 months. The polio virus, which mankind had fought to eradicate from the earth, was the last chance she had in the world.
You might feel just a tiny tug there.
A half teaspoon of polio flowed through a catheter inserted through Nancy's skull directly into her tumor.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Are you ready to
I'm
go?
ready. Bring it on.
We're starting. 9:21.
If you feel anything, you let us know.
I will, definitely.
Her husband, Greg, constantly inflated a buoyant optimism to save him from the weight of the unknown.
Okay.
Her glioblastoma was diagnosed in the 21st year of Nancy and Greg's marriage, just as the Georgia couple could make out the finish line for Zach and Luke at college. Her tumor can double in size every 2 weeks.
The tumor was aggressive, so
Yes.
you wanted an aggressive treatment.
Yes, yes.
You're a medical explorer. Does it feel that way to you?
I'm taking it one day at a time. It sounds very lofty to say medical explorer, but you know, throughout all of this, if this gives other people hope, I'm all for it.
Greg, you mentioned that Nancy was there for every important event in the boys' lives,
Right.
but there are a lot of important events to come.
Exactly.
What do you hope to see?
So I am going to see those boys walk across the stage at their college graduation. I am going to see them get married, and I am going to see grandkids, preferably in that order. And I know it's like such a mom bucket list, but I'll love every minute of it.
The number of calls are increasing again.
This is Duke's polio team. Dr. Daryl Bigner, director of the Tisch Brain Tumor Center, molecular biologist Matthias Gromeyer, and neuro-oncologist Dr. Henry Friedman and Dr. Annick Desjardins. As is typical, the university has licensed this technology to a new company to attract research dollars to the therapy, and all the members of the team are investors.
Good to see that this is going well.
Dr. Friedman screens more than 1,000 glioblastoma patients a year who would like to be treated at Duke. He helps decide who meets the criteria for the polio trial.
I wonder, of all the trials and all of the theories and all of the treatments that you have hoped for all of these years, how does this stack up?
This, to me, is the most promising therapy I've seen in my career, period.
The virus is the creation of, the obsession of, Dr. Gromeyer, who has been laboring over this for more than 25 years, the last 15 at Duke.
When you went to your colleagues and said, I've got it, we'll use the polio virus to kill cancer, what did they say?
Well, I got a range of responses from crazy to you're lying to all kinds of things. Most people thought it just was too dangerous.
I thought he was nuts. I mean, I really thought that what he's using is a weapon that produces paralysis.
Other researchers are experimenting with cancer treatments using viruses including HIV, smallpox, and measles. But polio was Dr. Gromeyer's choice because, as luck would have it, it seeks out and attaches to a receptor that is found on the surface of the cells that make up nearly every kind of solid tumor. It's almost as if polio had evolved for the purpose.
Here is the genetic material.
Gromeyer re-engineered the virus, removing a key genetic sequence. The virus can't survive this way, so he repaired the damage with a harmless bit of cold virus. This new modified polio virus can't cause paralysis or death because it can't reproduce in normal cells. But in cancer cells, it does. And in the process of replicating, it releases toxins that poison the cell. At least, that's what they'd observed in the laboratory. Eventually, they had to try it in a human being. It's a hell of a thing to be told that you have months to live when you're 20 years old. In 2011, Stephanie Lipscomb was a nursing student with headaches. A doctor told her she had this glioblastoma tumor the size of a tennis ball.
I looked at the nurse that was sitting there holding my hand, and I said, I don't understand, like, what did he just say? It's kind of hard for me to process.
You had 98% of the tumor removed.
Exactly.
As much radiation as you can have in a lifetime, and chemotherapy.
Exactly.
And then in 2012, what did the doctors tell you?
Your cancer's back.
With recurrent glioblastoma, there were no options, except the one that had never been tried.
Did they tell you that it had never been tried in a human being before?
They did. But at the same time, I had nothing to lose, honestly.
Her polio treatment began in 2012, and from the very beginning, it looked like a bad bet.
So we treated her in May. Then in July, the tumor looked bigger, looked really inflamed. I got really concerned, got really worried.
You thought this wasn't working?
I thought it wasn't working.
Neuro-oncologist Annick Desjardins wanted to abandon the polio experiment and return to traditional treatment, but Stephanie said no. 5 months after her infusion, an MRI showed the tumor only looked worse because of inflammation caused by Stephanie's immune system, which had awakened to the cancer for the first time and gone to war.
Why didn't the immune system react to the cancer to begin with?
So cancers, all human cancers, they develop a shield or shroud of protective measures that make them invisible to the immune system. And this is precisely what we try to reverse with our virus. So by infecting the tumor, we are actually removing this protective shield and enabling the immune system to come in and attack.
So essentially what's happening here inside the tumor is you have a polio infection.
Yes.
And that sets off an alarm for the immune system. The immune system says, there's a polio infection, we better go kill it.
Exactly.
And it turns out it's the tumor.
Yes.
It appears the polio starts the killing, but the immune system does most of the damage. Stephanie's tumor shrank for 21 months until it was gone. 3 years after the infusion, something unimaginable had happened. This is from an MRI in August 2014.
And there's no cancer in this picture at all.
We don't see any cancer, active cancer cells.
She is cancer-free. All that remains is this hole from an early surgery.
How surprised are you by that?
I'm surprised because you never expect on a phase 1 study in particular to have these kind of results.
You're not expecting to cure people in a phase 1 trial.
You're not even necessarily expecting to help them. You hope so, but that's not the design of a phase 1 study. It's designed to get the right dose. When you get anything on top of that, it's cake.
Quite a cake.
Quite a cake. Biggest cake we've seen in a long, long time.
Dr. Fritz Anderson showed us the results in another patient, himself. He's a retired cardiologist, and at age 70, he became the second person in the polio trial.
This is a fairly sizable temporal tumor, which means...
That we see right here.
On the left is his tumor before treatment. On the right, a hairline scar where it used to be. That was nearly 3 years ago.
Do you consider yourself cured, or do you call it remission?
I feel it as a cure, and I live my life that way.
After the early successes, the next patients would receive a higher dose. That's the whole idea behind a phase 1 trial, to increase the dose in succeeding patients step by step in search of the highest dose that is still safe.
We believe in the philosophy we've learned in chemotherapy that more is better. So if we were getting a good response at dose level 1 or dose level 2, then go to dose level 3, 4, 5.
60-year-old Donna Clegg was a social worker from Idaho. We met her in 2014, puffy from the steroids used to reduce the swelling in her brain.
I want to be able to live. So that's kind of how I feel that this is going to be my opportunity to have a full life.
Donna's polio infusion was 3 times more potent than the one that had worked for Stephanie. But in her case, this higher dose set off an immune response that was much too powerful. Donna battled the inflammation for 9 months before she died in March 2015.
Donna Clegg suffered quite a lot, and I wonder how that weighs on your mind.
Every patient who has an outcome that is not positive weighs on my mind. I think that when you're doing a phase 1 study, you know that these things can happen, but she is a patient who really did not derive benefit, and yet taught us something important.
You discovered that putting in too much poliovirus created too large an immune response.
Absolutely.
After that hard lesson, doctors cut the potency of Nancy Justice's dose by 85%. It was less than they had ever expected to use. They called this new dose dose -1. But even so, 4.5 months after her infusion, in March 2015, inflammation had caused the mass in Nancy's brain to double in size. But to Dr. Desjardins, the tumor looked weaker.
And in this image, it's shot through full of holes.
It's shot through full of holes, and let me show you the next picture, and you'll see it's even more and more holes.
So where does this go from here?
So now we keep following her, and hopefully it keeps shrinking, and it keeps collapsing. And that's what we have seen with Fritz and Stephanie, that it continued shrinking for years.
Nancy, when you look at this, what do you think?
Oh, it's amazing. Oh my gosh. I mean, thank you, Lord. And these doctors. Thank you, doctors. You know, and to just see this, you know, that's life.
Nancy Justice faces a hard road ahead, but along the way, new discoveries will take the researchers in a direction they never imagined. "38 patients have volunteered for Duke University's experiment to use the polio virus to kill glioblastoma, the most efficient, relentless cancer of the brain. The FDA's decision to grant Duke breakthrough status means the second phase of the trial will be expanded to about 40 institutions with hundreds of patients. If that goes well, Duke will be allowed to skip the third phase of the trial and make polio therapy for glioblastoma available to all. The route to this achievement was not a straight line. The first volunteers saw their tumors disappear, but later, patients suffered crippling setbacks. There was a way forward, but researchers found themselves on a path they had not imagined. Their guide through the mystery was a patient named Brendan Steele.
Riley and Connor for Mom and Dad.
On Christmas Eve, 2009, Brendan Steele could not know how precious the gift of life would be. At 37, he was an IT manager in Montana, a husband and father of 3. But then, doctors found glioblastoma and gave him 11 months to say goodbye. When surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy failed, Brendan volunteered for Duke's polio trial. And in 2013, he received the 6-hour polio virus infusion. But in removing the catheter, a blood vessel was severed. His wife, Kathy, was by his side.
Brennan said it's weird, and he goes to hold his head, and weird just kind of drained out, like that was the end of his speech.
You understood how bad off you were?
No.
No?
No, because I don't remember.
Emergency surgery stopped the bleeding, but the trauma left Brendan barely able to walk or talk. 7 months later, a biopsy revealed that his tumor was growing. Doctors gave Brendan chemotherapy. It had failed him before, but it might give him just a few more weeks. Neuro-oncologist Annick Desjardins did not imagine what happened next.
We gave him 1 dose of chemotherapy, and the lesion just melted, went away rapidly, which we don't see that happen normally.
2 months after that single dose of chemo, the tumor, the white mass on the right, started to break up. Brendan continued the chemotherapy, and in 8 months, it was gone. And what do the doctors tell you about your cancer today?
No cancer. No cancer.
Recurrent glioblastoma. And now they tell you they cannot find it in your brain.
Yep.
Brendan Steele has lived 35 months since his polio infusion. He's been cancer-free for 19. Dr. Henry Friedman, deputy director of Duke's Cancer Center, has a theory about why the chemo worked this time when it never had before.
Shockingly, chemotherapy in patients who have previously failed it, once they've had the poliovirus therapy, now seem to have a new, enhanced, almost extraordinary response to the chemotherapy, as if the poliovirus has set up the tumor to be more responsive to chemotherapy.
That was a surprise?
That was a surprise. And for us to see this, it was a stunning observation that is actually the platform for a future study that will involve chemotherapy and the poliovirus.
The discovery changed their approach to Nancy Justice. You'll remember when we last saw Nancy in March 2015, Dr. Desjardins saw signs her tumor was breaking up. But in the months that followed, the inflammation kept growing. As Nancy's brain compressed, she was losing the connections to her arm, her legs, and her relationship to the very space around her.
And then touch your nose here. To your nose. Yeah, to your nose.
Okay.
Whatever part of the brain involves the will to fight appeared to be unaffected. Now, would a single dose of chemotherapy have the same miraculous result as it did for Brendan Steele? Dr. Desjardins reached for their new discovery, and within 2 months, the mass was shrinking.
See how the folds of the brain are back when they were all squeezed shut?
Oh, wow.
The ventricle is reopening.
Hey, look at that. Hallelujah. Now that's what we're looking for, honey.
How did you feel at that time?
Oh, loved it. Loved. I mean, that's what we'd been working for, praying for.
Tumors getting smaller and smaller.
Somebody had taken a eraser to it.
As the inflammation retreated, there was new space for hope.
Up, 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 up. Elbow straight, elbow straight. Elbow
Look at the speed, honey.
Nancy found strength.
Yes.
And buoyed always by her husband Greg, she walked up to a mile a day. Nancy's life was covering a distance of time denied to glioblastoma patients. But last February, 15 months after her infusion of polio, her run met another hurdle.
Just a little more inflammation.
The day her journey began, she told us she would see her sons graduate, be married, and have children. In that order, she joked. Now, determination was nuanced with gratitude for what she'd had already. Nancy, when we met you the first time, I asked you about your mom bucket list. How are those weddings and grandkids looking to you now?
Okay, so right now, I'm thinking it's just the simple things right now that I enjoy.
7 weeks after that interview, in late March, Nancy was rushed back to Duke. The light that never dimmed was in her eyes, but her words were gone. This is what she was fighting. The inflammation engulfed half her brain.
I just think we need to know what we're dealing with so we can move.
Neurosurgeon Alan Friedman needed to find out if the mass was a buildup of dead cells from the immune response or active cancer. He slipped a needle into her brain to extract a bit of tissue.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you there in a second.
The tissue was rushed to the pathology lab where a microscope discovered dead cells where the polio was working, but also regrowth of the tumor. Glioblastoma had found a way back.
Hey, Nancy. How are you doing?
17 months after we first met Nancy, doctors Alan Friedman and Annick Desjardins explained to Greg that Nancy's tumor had now infiltrated parts of her brain responsible for breathing and cognition.
She's getting worse, and maybe it's the time where we cannot do anything anymore to help her, and we need to let her go.
And we love you, you know that, right?
We wondered whether Greg would do it all again.
Definitely, we would do it. Nancy would have been gone long ago. And I think it's given us some good time, and we appreciate that.
On April 6th, Nancy Justice, medical explorer, passed away at the age of 60. She'd had 9 more months than she could have expected. What did Nancy teach you?
From the treatment standpoint, what she taught us is 2 different things. So clearly, the combination of the poliovirus with the chemotherapy had at first an amazing response. We need to understand that. The next thing is, at some point, though, it stopped working. And why did that happen?
What the Duke team has learned is that inflammation is an unavoidable consequence of the immune system's attack in most patients, and that managing it with drugs will likely be a key to survival. So far, there have been 21 patients at this lowest dose, -1.
Yes.
8 of them have died.
Yes.
Put that in perspective for me.
All the ones who haven't died on a phase 1 trial is simply remarkable. To see positive results in terms of controlling a tumor or shrinking a tumor in patients with recurrent disease on a phase 1 trial is remarkable. It's not your goal, it's not your expectation, but it certainly is something that when you see it, you say, this is really terrific, this is special.
Apparently, the FDA saw something special too. Breakthrough status was granted after data showed that patients who'd been living an average of 10 months were living an average of 15 months, and 3 patients showed no sign of cancer at all after 3 years. Dr. Daryl Bigner, who runs Duke's Brain Tumor Center, has fought glioblastoma for 50 years. When you talk of median survival being extended from 10 months to 15 months, for some of these patients, it's 15 months and counting.
Yes.
They're still living.
Yes. Yes, and we still have got significant periods of high-quality survival, and that is a huge difference. And then we have patients like Stephanie, Fritz, and Brandon that are leading virtually normal lives. I mean, they probably go many days without even thinking about having had a glioblastoma, which is just amazing.
You were in medical school thinking about one day being able to beat glioblastoma, and now you are standing on this doorstep. What does that mean to you personally?
It's an enormous feeling, and I have to be very careful. I never want to give anyone false hope, but I see all of the science coming together now, and I know it's going to happen. I've never felt that way until now.
And in an amazing new development, this science may be coming together for an entire range of cancers. In the laboratory, Duke has used polio to kill cancer cells of the skin, pancreas, stomach, lung, colon, and prostate. Immunologist Dr. Smita Nair showed us what polio did to breast cancer in mice.
This is breast cancer tissue, and what we find is, if you look at this, is here is a tumor that got injected with poliovirus. Here's a tumor that got injected with just saline. And the difference in the tumor size is extremely visible here.
Night and day.
We kept seeing this. So we went back and asked the question, what is happening in the tumors? And we teased these tumors apart. And what we found were a lot of T cells in the tumor.
Immune system cells.
Immune system cells.
Dr. Nair has filmed immune system T cells, shown here in color, breaking apart a tumor cell. What you see took a little over 1 hour. This leads Dr. Nair and others to a fascinating possibility. Once immune cells are programmed to recognize a cancer, will they remember and attack that cancer everywhere in the body for a lifetime?
If you get a tumor again, these are memory T cells. They will remember that, and they can eliminate a recurrent or a metastatic tumor.
How long does it take typically to get from this mouse stage into a human trial?
I would say anything between 3 to 5 years. It takes some time.
Well, go back to work and stop talking to me.
That's what I will do. That's what I think I should do.
Remember 2 months ago you couldn't lift that heel.
There is much left to learn. Why do some patients suffer and die while others, given months to live, appear to have a complete recovery? 3 years after his polio treatment, Brendan Steele remains cancer-free, and he's determined to overcome the damage from his surgery, a conviction that he keeps within arm's length. It's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get up. Great words to live by.
Yeah, yeah. I remind myself every day, get up, get up.
4 years after his polio therapy, 73-year-old Fritz Anderson is traveling the world with his wife.
I'm alive because of it. If I hadn't received it, I don't think I would be here today.
And Stephanie Lipscomb, patient number 1 in the clinical trial 4 years ago, has now become a nurse.
Do you remember me coming in this morning? I know you're
Yes,
sleepy.
I did, yes.
You told us before that being a cancer patient would probably make you a better nurse. And I wonder, has it?
Oh, yes. To talk to my patients and tell them, look, I've been in the hospital, I've been sick like this. I can just see the hope in their eyes.
Where do you want to take your nursing career?
Pediatric oncology.
Kids with cancer.
Yes, sir. Because I was 20 when I was diagnosed. I wasn't really completely an adult, and I absolutely love kids. With this unique experience of surviving stage 4 cancer in my brain, if I don't do this, then it's kind of like a waste of being cancer-free.
You think you survived for a reason?
Oh, yes, most definitely.